So I will speak about research assessment in Romania. I am the founder of Epistemio, a startup aiming to improve research assessment and also the way in which institutions collect information about the publications authored by their scientists. I'm also a scientist at the Romanian Institute of Science and Technology, and for some time I have also been an advisor for the Romanian Minister of Education and Research during a period where we implemented important reforms I will speak about. Check this. Let me tell you a bit about the background of the reforms that have been made in Romania. They are very much based on the materials developed by a think tank of Romanian scientists that was organized in a kind of grassroots initiative. So in 2002, a Romanian scientist working in the United States sent an email to lists of Romanian scientists working abroad, asking them to help him found a journal aimed to connect Romanian scientists working abroad with those working in the country. So I responded to his query, and we founded in 2002 the Adastra Association of Romanian Scientists. The association was much concerned about promoting reforms in the Romanian system of research and higher education, and developed a range of studies about this. I made the first ranking of Romanian universities for Adastra, and we also developed a white book of Romanian research, trying to really find out what's happening in Romania in terms of internationally relevant research. Sometime in 2004 or 6, I guess, there was a meeting that also tried to connect Romanian scientists with those Romanians working abroad. And I presented here a speech about Adastra, and a few new members came to the association. And one of the new members was Daniel Funeriu, who is in the picture and later became Minister of Education and Research, and also the one who was a vice minister for research during this mandate. So in 2007, the President of Romania set up a presentation commission for the analysis and development of Romanian science and education policies, where a large part of the commission was formed of members of Adastra, including Funeriu as a vice president and me as a secretary. And so this commission was appointed to develop some studies on how to reform Romanian higher education and research. In 2008, based on the documents elaborated by this commission, a national deal on education has been signed by all parliamentary parties, where they have committed to these reforms and also to allocating larger amounts of money for research and higher education. And in 2009, a new government has been appointed with Daniel Funeriu as Minister of Education and Research. He was a scientist. He made his PhD under the supervision of a Nobel Prize winner in France. He had worked in Japan, in San Diego, and he also was the recipient of a prestigious Marie Curie Excellence Award that was funding a project at Technical University of Munich at the time he was nominated as minister. So within his mandate, a new law of education was enacted at the beginning of in January 2011, implementing major reforms for education, including higher education, and subsequently also the research laws were changed, implementing reforms also in the research system. There was very good feedback about these reforms, for example, from European Commission, who praised them. Nature magazine editorialists said that these were exemplary laws and structures for science. The French Minister of Education qualified it as a miracle, but of course it also led to a lot of opposition from vested interests. So the subsequent government also kind of changed back many of the things that were implemented at the time. However, I will talk about those reforms as they were implemented at the level of 2011. The main purpose of them was improving the efficiency of spending public money in education and research. So as you know, the distribution of results is very skewed in research, and of course it requires also a differentiated distribution of money to support this research, while previously the distribution of money was more or less egalitarian. For example, in higher education, it just depended on the number of students. So the purpose of reforms was allocating resources, including jobs in higher education research, research grants for research groups, and also institutional funding for universities and research institutes according to their performance. And therefore, assessment of research performance was an important part of these reforms. So yeah, the context was that we had a large scientific diaspora with many qualified scientists, well-performing scientists, but there were problems for them to come back in Romania and compete on jobs in universities because of the many structures, mechanisms, selection mechanisms, vested interest, and so on. This was the thing that we wanted to change. As I said, there was a quasi-arbitrary allocation of public funds for institutional funding. There was much subjectivity in the reviews for research grants because mainly Romanian scientists were used as reviewers. Of course, being a relatively small community, many of them knew each other, so there were lots of conflicts of interests that were not addressed by prior review, grant review procedures. The mechanism of habilitation has been introduced. Previously, a national level committee approved or vetoed applications for jobs in universities, but these, the things that they approved were previously approved by hiring committee, departmental committees, faculty committees, senate of universities, the rector, and they had to assess it based on just a file record on paper. So basically they could not perform well their job because they could not really veto, they could not afford to veto anything based on this procedure. So the new procedure did not depend on any prior approval by a particular institution, so anybody could come in Romania and apply for habilitation on the basis of just presenting a synthesis of prior research to a committee of experts, including at least one foreign expert. And passing the habilitation would allow the candidates to apply, to become eligible to apply for full professorships jobs in universities and also for supervising PhD students. There were also introduced minimal scientometric standards as eligibility criteria on one hand for applying for various levels of faculty positions in universities in order to prevent nepotism, academic inbreeding, and so on, and also in order to provide incentives for relevant research rather than spending time publishing lots of publications without very relevant content, and also for setting expectations, as there was wide level of performance among some type of faculty. So, for example, there would be professors supervising many PhD students, as much as 10 or maybe even more, but who, as compared from an international standards point of view, were not at the level even of a PhD, of a freshly minted PhD in Western countries. And another application of minimal scientometric standards was for yielding eligibility to apply to the main competitive calls for research funding. This was important as concomitantly there were also introduced mostly foreign reviewers, and we kind of wanted to limit the number of applications in order to make feasible recruiting a large number of foreign reviewers, but importantly, we do not want to diminish competition. So eventually there were still like over 1,000 applications, out of which about, I don't know, 10 or 30% were funded. And also for setting expectations. So as I said before, there were cases in which people who did not have a scientific record at the level of a Western PhD student were commanding grants of hundreds of thousands of euros, which was a waste of public money that the society could not afford anymore. So as I said, for grant applications, we also introduced mostly foreign reviewers, as previously mostly Romanian, only Romanian were we used. And after some feedback, the National Research Council also introduced a rebuttal phase in applications, which I kind of think that it's a kind of innovation in evaluating grants. So after applicants receive the evaluations of reviewers, they have the chance to submit a rebuttal that is considered in the final panel evaluation that gives a final ranking of projects. There was also introduced a classification of universities and the ranking of study programs that has been used to establish how to allocate base funding among universities and also among domains within a university. And this was previously a quasi-arbitrary decision by the minister. So this national research assessment exercise has been, well, it was not only about research. It was a holistic exercise, evaluation of universities, and has been coordinated by the European University Association. And it had two components, one based on quantitative indicators and that was supposed to be updated yearly, and also a component of assessment by committees of foreign academics who were supposed to come physically in universities and make assessments once every 4 years. There was also a national assessment for evaluation and classification of research institutes, also aimed at allocating base funding. So institutes were classified into 4 categories, and only those that would have been classified in the first 3 categories would have had access to institutional funding. This was based on a review by expert committees, also mostly composed by foreign scientists that were also supposed, that have also come to physically visit the institutes and were also informed by data and reports. And this was supposed to happen once every 5 years. So once the institutes would be eligible for base funding, the amount of funding would have depended on quantitative indicators, including scientometric ones, updated yearly. So to synthesize, for individuals, we used minimal scientometric standards for eligibility, but these were supposed to be minimal in the sense at the level of, let's say, a PhD student a PhD graduate at a Western university, and not to prevent competition, and the final decisions would have been taken by committees after peer review. While for institutions, there also were assessments by committee through peer review, but because of the costs involved in bringing these reviewers to Romania and, of course, the time investment involved, this could have happened only once every 4 to 5 years. And to account for year-to-year dynamics in research performance, there was also assessments through numerical indicators, including scientometric ones, updated yearly. Regarding the scientometric indicators that have been used, there was an early decision not to use the impact factor for reasons that have been already discussed by Mr. Ahmed. So it was considered much too manipulable, also to this kind of misplaced, using different categories of publications for the numerator and the denominator, as Professor Ahmed has presented. But in the case of Romania, there also was a much higher danger of inducing inappropriate and incentivized inappropriate activities, such as generating citation cartels among local journals in order to artificially increase the impact factor, as it was also presented for a case in Serbia and so on. So we looked for indicators that would prevent such kind of gaming and incentivize relevant research. Ideally, it would also be field normalized, because the performance of various fields in research in Romania varies a lot. So if indicators would have been field normalized, then it would have been easier to convince people from lowly performing fields to adopt the usage of such indicators if the same levels would have been acceptable by people in better performing fields. And also, we wanted the indicators to be quite simple in order for people to understand and adopt them, and also for the manageability of collecting and auditing all the information. So, for example, it is known that article level indicators would be better than journal level indicators, but counting the number of citations and especially checking them would be quite difficult, especially as we, in order to prevent gaming, we wanted to use only citations from qualified sources or weighted citations. So yeah, this would have been an ideal if such data would have been readily available from international databases, but it was not the case. So eventually we discussed about using the article influence score, which is based on a weighted count of citations. That meaning that a citation is worth as much as the value of the source that cites it. So this would prevent citation cartels, because if one paper is cited by many papers in a very poor journals, this does not count much towards the article influence score. Although it varies much little among domains than the impact factor, after discussions in the National University Research Council, it appeared that there was a need to further normalize it. So basically, we used a relative article influence score, where we took the article's influence score provided by Thomson Reuters, and it was divided to the median of this indicator among journals in a particular field as defined by Thomson Reuters. So then we had a normalized indicator which a clear meaning. So a value of 1 would mean an article in an average journal. So for the minimal standards that were used for eligibility for grants applications, I will give an example for grants in fundamental research amounting to about 350,000 euros for 3 years. So in natural sciences, scientists, in order to be eligible to apply, would need to have a total aggregate relative article influence score of at least 2 from publications from publications in journals with at least 0.5 relative article influence score as a main author from the last 10 years. That meaning that that they have to have the equivalent of at least 2 articles in average journals published as main author in the last 10 years. And that threshold of 0.5 was meant to prevent accumulating this from many publications of very low value. For social sciences, this has been adapted by lowering the 0.5 threshold to 0.25, and also accounting for books or book chapters indexed in at least 3 foreign university libraries according to WORCAT. And this quite awkward condition was meant to prevent using the many books who were edited locally, but many of them were not reviewed at all, were not even available in libraries and so on. So they were there just for community points in curriculum vitae, but not for any relevant research or academic purpose. And further adaptation was needed for humanities, where also articles in the Arts and Humanities Citation Index were accounted for, and so on. So this is just an example of, let's say, quite simple standard that was devised for or grant applications for this fundamental research competition. Regarding the minimal standards for positions, there were lots of variants. So each commission, well, there were about 18 commissions specialized in various fields in the national committee responsible for human resources in higher education, and each committee devised its own scheme. So in some cases, the sum of relative article influence score for publications in journals having this indicator above a certain threshold was used. In some other cases, citations were counted from journals having the indicator above a threshold, also the relative article influence score of citing journals were summed and so on. In some cases, indicators were used that were normalized to the number of authors. And this accounted for work done in collaboration. In other cases, indicators were used for the work performed as main author, and so on. There were many variations. In engineering, because and computer science, because there are fields where conferences are an important vehicle for publication, they had to be taken into account, but because they do not have something like the article influence score, some other indicators had to be used, and there was a pre-existing classification of conferences made by the Australian Research Council that has been used. And more generally, there was a kind of Baroque multiplication of standards for the various domains. So, for example, in social sciences and humanities, there was a system of equivalence of various criteria to 2 points, and there were up to 22 categories or types of publications that were accounted for, and there were 9 thresholds for indicators that were aggregating among these 22 categories, so that scientists had to surpass. So, yeah, so this was kind of ugly, but needed because of the state of research system in Romania. So as I told you before, it would have been better to use article-based indicators instead of journal-based one or container-based ones. But such indicators are not readily available, especially if one wants to weigh citations in order to prevent gaming. I see the container-based indicators as a choice of last resort, that it had to be used because it gave some information about the relevance of research. But as the graph on the screen shows, so the graph shows the number of papers with various numbers of citations in several journals in neuroscience. So even if the journals are from traditionally considered of quite different levels, we see that averages over these distributions represent quite poorly the number of citations of any individual paper in the distribution. So this is a known problem that it had to be dealt with. And yeah, so at the time it was used, there were used the mechanisms that were available in terms of sources of information. But I guess that there is a much better solution for these issues, and this is going back to the peer review. And this is because the quantitative assessment of relevance performing by reviewers and by the editor when a manuscript is reviewed is thrown away after the decision to publish the paper or not has been made. And the public receives just this one bit of information, that these publications was assessed to be publishable in a particular container. But no information remains about the level that was assigned to the paper by the reviewers. Also, there may be such information from the people who read and implicitly assess the publication post-publication. So citations are an expression of this post-publication peer review because people implicitly assess a publication when they decide to cite it or not. However, the level of relevance that is assessed by those scientists who read the papers is an information that is thrown away currently. Also, we do not account for the relative relevance of citations within a paper. So if I write a paper on a certain topic, maybe I cite 30 or 40 other papers, but surely I base my work on just a very little number of previous papers. So for example, maybe 2 to 3 papers would be the ones that on which my paper would be based on a proportion of maybe more than 90%. And this is not, this is an information that is currently not available by analyzing citation lists. So after I quit the ministry, I founded this startup called Epistemio, and one of our main purpose is aggregating ratings and reviews post-publication from scientists who have read the publications or are interested in reading it anyway, in order to collect all this information that is very useful for such assessments but is currently lost. And the point is that it is very easy to aggregate over the internet such information if the scientists would have the appropriate incentives to do so. So this would lead to aggregate ratings that are domain independent, so there's no problem of ad hoc normalization after the fact. It is universal, so there are no more differences in assessments for papers in journals, conferences, books, even preprints. Publications from all kinds of fields, even humanities, can be assessed in the same, could be assessed in the same way as publications in other fields. So I guess this would solve an important problem to which previously we had only this solution of generating baroque and complex indicators. Also, in some cases, it gets away with the limits of ad hoc committees that are organized in order to assess, let's say, departments or I don't know, research groups or institutions. By aggregating over the internet reviews from ratings and reviews from experts in the field, there would be more reviewers, eliminating the biases involved in using a committee of maybe just 10 or 20 people. And these reviewers would be specialized in the core area of the reviewed publications. So the reviews would be more likely to account for the content of these publications rather than, again, for the prestige of the container. So the research assessment exercise in the UK is one of the, let's say, best known and maybe best studied and refined over time. But still, if we look at how many publications have to be reviewed by the committees that they use, we see that one person within a committee would have to read a large number of papers that is actually impossible to read in the time that they have. So again, they mostly look, well, in order to evaluate the papers, I guess that also they mostly look to citations or the prestige of the container, so not to the actual content, which is what they would be supposed to evaluate. And in the cases where previously committees were also required to come locally, this would eliminate the waste of time spent to traveling and would also cut travel and accommodation costs. And regarding the university assessment exercise that has been performed in Romania, we observed many errors in the publications-related data. So the ministry had to issue a call for rechecking of data submitted by universities, and even after rechecking, errors remained, and some universities had to be penalized because of over-reporting. And one cause for this was that universities seem to have primitive processes for aggregating their list of publications. So in many cases, data seem to be mostly collected to manual processes, like Excel files sent by email or by ad hoc in-house made software that was quite unfriendly, and some people reported as being extremely awful to work with because it wasted their time. So as a result, we decided to develop a system that would assist institutions to collect their list of publications, and this is called Epistemio Outcomes, and is already available as an online platform. And it allows institutions to collect the publications at various levels, including research groups, labs departments, universities, even national systems. And these publications can be exported for various reports, including reports for the government, for example, and also at each level to be embedded on web pages, so that each unit within a university can have a permanently up-to-date web page listing all its publications. So that was my presentation. So if there is time, I will be ready to ask.
Thank you.
Questions.
One urgent question. Yes, please.
Could you explain a little how is the revenue generated by the patents estimated? It's from financial point of view, or just from there are other criteria?
Yes. So indeed, in these minimal standards used for eligibility for positions in universities, there was also the option that was introduced in order to encourage people not just to publish, but also to apply the results of their research. So this option was that if they had patents that generated certain revenues, for example, about 250 100,000 euros for a professor, or half for the second level. Yeah, so they could become eligible for these jobs, and this amount was supposed to be computed based on all kind of revenues, such as licensing or selling the patent, or also revenues generated by a company that used the patent. Yeah, but unfortunately, I don't know of any case where where people were accomplishing this criteria. Although these were amounts that they would get from the state in order to develop an applied project. So it was assumed that at least in some cases, this money would have been obtained by applying the results.
Thank you. Let's thank our speaker again.